Welcome to UpThinking Finance, a podcast that offers a unique and discerning view of economics and financial planning. Here is your host, Emerson Fersch.
So welcome to another episode of UpThinking Finance. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind." It's my pleasure today to have my friend coming back to us from Northern Ireland, Melissa Ciummei. She's an independent researcher and investor, and I think what makes her particularly unique is she has a degree in theology from Trinity University in Dublin. So, Melissa, welcome back. Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
It's hard to believe the last conversation we had on the podcast was literally August of last year. So it doesn't seem like it's been a year. Of course, we saw each other in May in California, but I guess the first place I wanted to start was really, we did spend a lot of time on CBDCs, centralized digital currencies. And so maybe just an update on kind of where that has gone and whether it's progressed, whether it's stalling, where the tentacles are digging in. So, let's start there.
Well, we've seen that it was a failure in Nigeria. So that's what they've launched. They've launched in a couple of places, but that's just putting out the failures to see. Now, there was an IMF paper that actually discussed how to get rid of cash, breaking through the zero lower bound. And one of the things that it recommended, it was, fee for withdrawal, remove physical cash, and prohibit storage. So what they attempted to do in Nigeria was remove the physical cash, and that was met with hostility, did not work. So other than that, there's nothing particularly being pushed out because they're just working. But what CBDC is programmable money. So it's a control mechanism. So it's not for me, it's weaponizing the medium of money. So it's everything that's good about fiat for us, which is actually very little, is being removed. So the anonymity is being removed, the autonomy is being removed. But that's the control mechanism. So this is programmable currency. But first you have to create a demand for a currency. So if they were to roll out, there was a report, McKinsey report from 2019, which suggested about the voluntary uptake of CBDC would be about 4 to 12%. Interesting that Stefan Aldrich also said the uptake for mRNA would be about 5%. So we've seen how they managed to coerce so many people into taking part in a clinical trial. So that was kind of around the same time. So they have to create a demand for this currency. So how can they create a demand for the currency? For me, they will more likely, they first of all have to get digital ID. So if they get you into a digital ID system, then that's all the information they need. So they have all the data on you. Then they can force you into creating the demand for the currency by possibly making you pay your taxes in CBDC. They will issue welfare in CBDC. That's going to be a great one because then that's also going to get the businesses on board if they want to make use of that transaction. Should commercial banks fail, which is quite likely, well, we know that commercial banks right now, it's not your money, it's a loan to the bank. You're an unsecured creditor. So people will naturally move to CBDC if it's perceived to be safer, and they could offer a higher interest rate. So they have to get demand from that. But in order for the totalitarian control that they want to enforce to be implemented, they need to get everybody on board with the digital ID. So before CBDC, in order for it to function as they want it to function, otherwise, why would we be even moving into CBDC? Why is there a need for, we already have a digital currency, so why are we moving into CBDC? For me, it's for taxation and tyranny. That's what it provides. That's what every revolution, the basis has been taxation and tyranny. And that tells you everything that then you need to know about government. So the government are just moving into another taxation and tyranny method. And CBDC combined with artificial intelligence, combined with you giving them all the data for digital ID, provides the perfect framework for, it's the ultimate prison, the ultimate tax prison for people to be in. So right now they're pushing for digital ID. They've got it in Australia. Their Labour Party are recently announcing it. You don't have to get it, but we've been in a position where you don't have to get it, but just only if you want to actually participate in society. Other than that, you don't have to get it. It's already running in India, have the Aadhaar card. Iran have biometric ID. In the Republic of Ireland, they have a public service card, which isn't fully biometric yet, but it's a short step. It's very much related to it. You have to have it in order to get your welfare. You have to have it in order to get a passport or driving license. So that's what they're going to absolutely be pushing between now and 2027. Ideally, the UN said they want everybody on it by 2025, but 2027 will be the last chance for everybody to be on board with that. When they get people on board with that, then it's game over. And for immigration, it's a great way to get people on board with it, with immigration. Where there is chaos in the south of Ireland right now, there is rioting in the streets, they're burning down buildings because of the mass immigration to the south. 85% of those coming in are undocumented, meaning that they've got on a plane with a passport and the passport has disappeared. So they've flushed them out, they've got rid of them. And they're allowing this to happen. Currently, about 22% of the population of the south of Ireland are immigrants. So if there's a vast majority coming in undocumented, these people are going to need documents. And we're seeing the same thing in Australia. We're seeing the same thing in Canada. We're seeing the same thing in America. In America, I think by the time of the next election, there'll be around 50 million. And that has increased by about 30 million in the past few years. So these are undocumented. So it is the case of problem, reaction, solution. So the problem is, what comes it? Because when you import poverty, you become poor. And you're importing crime, you're importing sexual assaults. In Sweden, there was a 359% rise in sexual assaults. We're seeing that in the south of Ireland, then just overall crime. And we're seeing gangs starting to form. I know in America, that's a huge problem with gangs. They're sending them out of prisons, they're sending them out of psychiatric wards. And these people are going to need, so that's the problem. The reaction from the people is, you need to do something about this. And the solution that will be offered is, well, listen, you need to, because on the Labour Party manifesto, it says the digital ID is to prove your identity. So now you need to prove who you are. So, and with 22% of the south of Ireland being non-migrants, well, we're not getting the critical mass of the people who will accept it. So when you combine that with the people who are being given welfare payments, you're going to get everybody on board with it. And once you hit that critical mass, it's very difficult to operate in society without having this. And we've seen this with the passports a few years ago, that it's difficult to operate in society. So that was kind of a beta test for what's coming. When people accept that, it's a very small step. Once they have you under complete surveillance and have access to all of your data, it's a very small step to link that to CBDC and then evolve that into possibly a new currency. They're certainly trying to create a new currency of carbon and social credits. So replacing bank credits with carbon credits for totalitarian control of the economy, of every aspect of the economy, of your assets and your life. When I say assets, the BIS they've previously come out and said they want all of your assets tokenized and put in a digital wallet. The European Union have just come out and put the suggestion of a European assets register. Now, why would they want to take stock of your assets? They've particularly mentioned gold, real estate, crypto, and what was the art?
Artwork, yeah.
So why would they want to have a stock of this? They're saying what they always say, it's for money laundering and anti-crime. That's how they get everything in. But for me, the only logical reason is one of two things. Taxes or confiscation. So in taxes, if they have a full portfolio of all of your assets, and that will extend to absolutely everything you buy, then they can impose these wealth taxes that were floated a little bit in California. So say it's only 1% wealth tax per year. That possibly is doable when you are on the increase and earn more money. But when you're coming out of retirement or slowing down, means that you have to sell assets. So it makes it difficult to start to accumulate assets. They can impose capital gains tax. They can impose unrealized capital gains tax. So they can tax you at will, and CBDC provides the infrastructure. It is the control mechanism to tax you at will. But also there is the possibility of confiscation, because the buzzwords are sustainability and equity. So to be more sustainable, to have more equity in society, they can take your assets and redistribute them, should they design. Because you have to remember that what the problem is, there's too much debt. There's not enough growth to cover the debt. When debt fails, which mathematically it will, there isn't enough real world assets to back up the debt instruments. That is the problem. So they're going after, and you're certainly seeing BlackRock, they're going after the real assets, because they know the financialized house of cards that they've built on top of them is falling. So now they're going after the real assets, and that's why they're also trying to monetize nature with natural asset companies. There's no logic behind it, but it's just a new thing that they can monetize to build another financial house of cards to replace the one that's currently failing. That's for me everything that's going on right now. It's the best explanation for what we're seeing with immigration. There's also an issue if you read well, first of all, there's the UN did a report, replacement immigration. Now they're saying that it's in terms of pensions, that there isn't enough. The demographic should be like this. It's currently like this, and it's heading towards this. Now, if a pension is a Ponzi scheme, this doesn't work with a Ponzi scheme. An inverted pyramid doesn't work with a Ponzi scheme. That's what they're saying it for. But in their own documents, they're saying that by 2050 in Europe, there's going to be 75% non-nationals, working up to 99%. There's about 70% males coming in. It's the same in America. So this isn't just happening in Europe or Ireland in particular, because that's where I'm more familiar with, or America or Canada. This is happening in the West. So why is this happening in the West? Well, the Brundtland report suggested that there'd be a transition of power from the polluting West to India and China. Have we seen that happen? Yes, as soon as they come into the World Trade Organization, shortly after 9/11, everything has boomed there. So there seems to be this transition, and they can use they account for 50%, currently 50% of global GDP and 50% of global population. When you throw them together and they create a new currency, it will crush us. So we're being pushed into dilution because they don't want patriotism. You can't have a one world government with strong patriotic nations. You have them bringing in the digital ID. So it's multifaceted. The benefits of this immigration is multifaceted for them. And if you have 1 billion people have no electricity. 2 billion people on top of that have spotty or intermittent electricity. 2 billion people in this world earn less than $2 a day. These people they're the producers. They're the ones that actually produce everything that we're buying. They're up and coming. They're creating middle classes within their own communities. And when you're up and coming, maybe if you're in India, you do want a little bit of air conditioning. That requires energy. So energy has to be budgeted as well. While there is an abundance of energy, we don't have the infrastructure to extract it and distribute it. So life is going to change very much for the West, whether we like it or not. Not necessarily a bad thing for me. I think the debt-based system required everyone to be consumers, because if you want more money, you have to have more debt. And debt brings money into existence. So we were encouraged to get into debt. It went beyond just your mortgage. It went into then your education, your car. Like when I was growing up, there's no such thing as a car loan. And it's down to now here, it's your washing machine, you're getting it in credit. If you buy a dress, you can get it in like 3 different installments. More and more creative ways to get you into debt to expand the economy. That has failed. But it's imploded under the weight of its own greed. And now the plan is to move into a new economy, because with demographic issues, there's less consumers. So to move into this new economy of the subscription economy. And that's where the sustainability comes in, that we'll take control of everything and then rent it back to you in order to be sustainable. But really, you have total control over somebody, because when you own something, at least if I own my own home and I don't want to take a particular medicine or go along with a certain agenda, I can decide not to do that. If I don't own my home, it can be dictated to me. If you don't, we will evict you. So there is, in this drive, people need to be very, very careful of what's happening. Along with this portfolio of your assets, remember, governments currently they take about 70% conservatively of everything that you earn. And they're still legally insolvent. Right now they're going after, they're creating an income from inflation. So inflation at its core is a tax. They're taking about, if you have, just say 10,000 in your bank, they're taking about 5 to 10% of that every year. So that's just a direct transfer to the government. But they can't continue with that. So they're going to have to get more and more creative at getting things from you. With CBDC, they don't have to be creative. It's just a complete totalitarian control. So you're going to see them moving more towards, governments moving more towards taxation, and it'll be floated, tax the rich. It's never the rich that get taxed. The uber rich don't pay taxes, they pay politicians. The rich pay accountants. The middle earners, they're the ones that pay all the taxes, and then you have a dependent class below that. So you can only squeeze that so much before there's nothing left. So the head can only eat so much of the tail before it's gone. And that's the place that governments are in. So if they were to take control of your assets, or if they tax your assets possibly out of your ownership, or like what has happened with stocks, you have an entitlement rather than direct ownership. So you are owed it rather than actually owning it, because you're being told you will own nothing. But other than that, everything's great.
Well, I'll tell you what. So because of our last conversation, now I do pay attention to the BIS annual report. Thanks, by the way, for that. But, you read this, right? And the editorial in the beginning is so far so good. And then, one little snippet out of there, which it kind of speaks to the whole theme of it. Inflation has declined substantially with little collateral damage so far. And they dissect all this stuff, but the one thing that doesn't get discussed at all is just this huge amount of debt that all these countries and these governments have, and what the impact is. I mean, it's like it doesn't exist and it's just business as usual. So I wasn't going to ask you this, but it kind of came up, and I'm curious because and I don't know if the populist is a word that's getting thrown out, but there's been a lot of pushback we've seen in Europe, in different countries with these elections. And Russell Napier, I've mentioned him before. He's down in Scotland, and he talks, he speaks to the economics of what's going on. And he cited a talk that Macron gave, I don't know when it was, probably 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. And basically talking about how, questioning why France is funding the United States, which means investing money, in our securities here. And there seemed to be this idea of it's getting to, because of the, what's the word? Just the economics of the, these the social rebellion, if I'm going to call it that, is pushing back on the economic direction. And there seems to be an element of an every man for himself kind of a mentality that's going on, which, and then of course makes, as you just mentioned earlier, a unified currency, the euro, very difficult to support when everybody's got their own decisions as to where they want to go. And so my question is has that shift politically had any impact on some of these things we've been talking about?
There could quite possibly be a few countries that decide to leave the euro because it's no longer beneficial to them. I'm kind of always the level above, because what the Eurozone was an attempt to create a United States of Europe. And with that, it's centralized control. So the people that are making the directives from Brussels weren't voted in by any of the people that are suffering the consequences of immigration policy, of business policy, on loads of different things, like with car manufacturing, etc. So they're not. It's these non-elected leaders making the decisions, and people just floated by and it was fine, and they didn't really notice because they were just going about their everyday life. But now that their pockets are getting squeezed tighter and tighter, they're starting to ask questions, and they're starting to look to, well, why are we following these? We don't want this. Why? And that's certainly what's happening with immigration in the south of Ireland. People are starting to realise, hey, we're getting the dictate from non-elected leaders, and there is an increasing amount of knowledge, because it is ideological moulding. COVID was the first phase of it. So you started to realise, who do these people represent? They don't represent us. So where are they getting their orders from? We know that what we say that we want, we're being completely ignored. So they're getting their orders from somewhere else. We've seen that the police aren't necessarily there to protect the people. They seem to be protecting those that are perpetuating this narrative. And more people are starting to look around and ask questions about what is going on. And that's my understanding. I know that there was pushback in Sweden as well. The French, protesting is, that's their national sport. They love it. They're very, very good at it. So, people are starting to wake up, and that's dangerous to this narrative. There's the thing that if they had have waited 20 years to get this in, people probably wouldn't have batted an eyelid, because they have conditioned our children to live their lives behind a screen. So even in the schools, they're bringing in, my son's whole schooling was iPad instead of books, which I despised, but there's no alternative to it. So they would have had them completely hooked up to the Internet of Things anyway, that, you scan, you use your phone for everything, you have no bank cards, anything like that. So they could have got this in. But why this big push to the end? And that's where I would be really suspicious that mathematically they know that this could break at any time. And everybody keeps, the question I get asked so much is like, well, what happens in the crash? Or what do we do to avoid it? There's people already working in different realms, particularly within finance, creating community currencies, that kind of thing. So there's no demand for them right now, but should there be a demand for them, they will start to appear. But other than that, what I would expect is that your debt is their asset in terms of banking. Your deposit is their liability. So your liability will then be just moved to the central bank. So it'll become a liability of the central bank. And in an economic collapse, it's not that, yes, some of the businesses that are non-functional businesses anyway, they're either superfluous or they're not non-viable in terms of profit. They will close if they're dependent on credit. They could quite possibly a few of them close. Other than that, anything that happens is it's just a transfer of ownership. That's all that happens in a crash. Vultures come in, buy up everything. And we see BlackRock. Have you read Larry Fink's last letter to investors?
No.
It's very, very short, twofold, and one was in relation to pensions and one was in relation to infrastructure. So if governments are, so basically what they're saying with pensions is governments don't, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's collapsed. People aren't going to have the pensions. The government will still take your taxes for your pension, but you're going to have to go out and get your own pension. And BlackRock are poised to do that for everybody. But this is the thing, we fund this beast. The BlackRock's funding comes from everyone's investment and pensions. They're also, the second part of it was in regards to infrastructure. Now, if you know that governments are insolvent, since 2008 in the UK, there's been no spending on infrastructure because they had to reduce their budget. So how do they do that? Yeah, they reduce the size of government. They're not willing to do that. They can take in more in taxes. They do that through indirect taxes because nobody likes income tax. So they just put up car tax, council tax, all the other taxes. And they've maximised on that. But they cut spending in infrastructure because with the UK, it's a circle. Half of that circle is between welfare, pensions, and healthcare. So that's what we're certainly going to see, a big reduction in those spend. But it comes to the point where you have private investors, and that's what the public-private partnership is about. Private investors coming in and buying up the infrastructure and, replacing the infrastructure, but they own the infrastructure. So now these mega corporations are owning your country, not you. And they have a say in it because the best example is to see we have to pay a road tax for the roads, but there's also tolls. And if you want to go on that road, which is the better road, you have to pay a toll. That's what these companies are planning to come in. And that's, for me, that was the crux of his letter. They're also kind of moving in towards this. They're still pushing the green agenda. They've pulled back a little bit because I think people are aware that the climate narrative is, well, there's two sides to it. So you need to be very careful when you're allowing a small group of people to make the decisions for everybody. You need to be damn sure that they're right. Because what if they're not? If they're pushing this narrative and doing what, all of this solar radiation management and cloud seeding, if they're doing all this, we need to be sure that they're right, because we've seen this happen before under Mao Zedong. What was it? Man must overcome nature or something like that. Man must conquer nature. And he had the 4 pest strategy. And he got everybody involved in it. That was the ideological molding. Even got children involved in it. Knocking sparrows out of nests. It was like rats, sparrows, flies. I can't remember. There was 4 anyway. That resulted in, because you were removing the natural predators, that resulted in up to 100 million people dying of starvation. So we really need to be on the ball here and make sure that these people know what they're doing, because this could be catastrophic. But we kind of delegate. This is my thing. I think a lot of them are crazy, but we're lazy, and we delegate responsibility to them, and they capitalise on this. So I think what's happening is people are waking up. It has got so ridiculous that people are starting to wake up and ask questions. Why is this happening? So what they tried to do with, my thesis was always that it was the COVID narrative was step 1. So if you can get somebody to agree with something that they know not to be true, first of all, you're humiliating yourself when you agree with something that's not true. So, and then you're more likely to go, you have the Ben Franklin effect, where if somebody asks for something small, they're more likely to accept something bigger. So within, let's say, 6-8 weeks. So, because there's a lot of people terrified, and we've seen the videos and all of that. So within 6-8 weeks, people knew, hey, what was happening in these videos, we're not seeing happening with our eyes. But you were paid to pretend. So you stayed at home and pretended because it was beneficial to you. And now there's the gender ideology, where, again, in order to be virtuous and in order to be kind, we're willing to pretend that a man can be a woman. Now, not dress like a woman, pretend to be a woman, because we have ladyboys in Thailand, and that's an acceptable part of their culture, but they're called ladyboys. They're not demanding to be called women. So that now that's something else that we're accepting that we know not to be true, but in order to be kind and virtuous, we'll go along with it. That's phase 2. And we're about to be hit with phase 3 hard, which is the climate agenda that we know not to be true. We have all the evidence. For me personally, I'd be way more interested in exploring the detrimental effects of microplastics on this world first, before looking any bigger. But this is to kind of push you into the carbon credits. This is where they want you to go. And so replacing, like I say, bank credits with carbon and social credits. So it's not about what you have, it's about what you're allowed to use in this world based on your credit score.
You made a comment about the United States that I want to get back to before we're done. But so do you think there's any truth? Because there was this 2030 plan, which is what I've read about, and Donald Trump getting elected, at least from the perception on this side of the Atlantic, sped up the plan because he delayed it. He undid a lot of things, not part of the system. And so you see then, and you made a really good point about there's, or you just alluded to it, there's a bit of a desperation. You talk about, like, you brought up this need to, the ability to finance anything. I mean, I bought a t-shirt for working out for $20, and I just thought of it when you were talking. There was an installment plan on a $20 t-shirt. I mean, but it seems things have gotten to this desperation point. I mean, and even with the Olympics, I mean, I've never been an Olympics guy, but I've seen enough, on X with these clips of the opening thing with the mocking of the Last Supper. And I mean, just blatant, I mean, there's no other nice way to put it. It's immorality. And I have a friend, Charles C. Smith, over in Hawaii, who talks a lot about the fact that whether it's PC or not, the lack of morals is really what's tearing down the society. And so, and I know and you've kind of answered the question, because I think it's gotten to a point where things have been accelerated so quickly. It's almost like a Hail Mary in a way for the dark side is what I'm going to call it. I mean, even like this thing with Biden. I mean, he's all of a sudden we haven't heard hide nor hair from the guy. He said nothing. I mean, it's like, literally people are, who's running the country? Who is running the country? If this guy's not fit to run for re-election, how can he, you know what I mean? And these are things that I think, like you said, and I don't know what, I mean, I was kind of part of the generation. You and I are sort of in the same general vicinity age-wise. I'm older, obviously, but to where, I was before computers, before the internet and after. I kind of have a foot in both sides of that, and I'm grateful for it. But you start to wonder, you just start questioning, what do you believe anymore? What do you believe anymore? And it just seems like you have to be engaged, is maybe my point. There's an element of what you said where people have just been sort of led to either want to be told what to do or are so distracted just trying to make it. Then you get into all the economics of things that you're talking about as well, this huge division. And I wonder sometimes if people are just so busy just trying to survive that, a lot of this stuff that, I think COVID helped people slow down and start paying more attention to. That's a kind of a positive silver lining to the whole thing. But it's just interesting to me. But it just seems like it's become this group that's trying to just centralize everything is really gotten to a point where they're just trying to force everything out there, because it's sort of, it seems like it's falling apart. Like you said, the house of cards is falling apart. There was another thing I was going to bring up, but You said I want to get back to this because this was a really interesting point. You talked about the Europe becoming another United States, or that was the goal of the euro. But what's interesting in that thought is that there are people who view, I view as growing up here, United States is the United States. But the implication of what you said is that there are people that see it as a fragmented group of a bunch of individual units that are united. And there is a movement. It seems like one of the consequences of all this division has been to break the United States up. You've got portions of Idaho that want to, or Oregon that want to break away and connect over to Idaho because of the value shift that's gone on up there. You've got this idea, Texas, all this stuff that's out there, even in California, it used to be the Inland Empire and all that wanted to carve itself off as a separate state. And you almost see that that's a part of the plan, this separation of people and this division. Anyway, I don't know there's a point in all that, but I'm with you. I think from my circles, people are starting to see this. They're starting to question these things that we sort of just ignored.
It is all about separate. Now, America stands in the way of a globalist agenda because of your constitution. Your constitution does not allow for top-down authority. So it literally does put the power in the hands of the people, but your constitution only works if you stand by it and enforce it. They're trying every method to separate us. So, like here, it's like a Muslim invasion, and I don't have any issue with Muslims. That's their culture. It's not my business. But it's vastly different to our culture. So when you try and put those people together, obviously there's going to be friction. So the invasion is to create as much friction as they possibly can and as much division. And you're never going to completely agree with somebody else. And there's this like culture in social media. If I don't agree with what you say, blocked, whatever, like unfriend. And I just find it so bizarre because you have to accept that not everybody thinks like you. But we all have some commonalities in our thinking, and there's never going to be a time when everybody is on the same page. But while they have us left, right, Democrat, Republican, black, white, Muslim, Christian, man, woman, gay, straight, all these divisions. So they're moving you more into being I'm a woman, right? So I'm in this group, but then I'm not gay, so I'm in this group. So you're being pushed into being more and more and more of an individual, because when you're an individual, it's very easy to sweep you along, because you feel alone and you'll go along with anything. And that's what cults do. Cults tend to identify people who need a sense of belonging and pull them in because they're the loners of society. In a strong community, you can't sweep them along. That's why I say that you can't have a one world government without patriotic nations. What people need to realize is it's not this side. It's top versus the rest of us. So 1% of the world currently own 50% of the assets. The bottom half of the world only own 0.75. Bottom 50% of the world only own 0.75 of the assets. There's the division you want to be looking at. Not this side. We can all get along. We can all respect each other. And what happened at the Olympics was a lack of respect of Christianity. They know what's going on in Europe. They know that there's a Muslim invasion of Europe. So they knew that was done very deliberately, because you have 2.3 billion Christians, 1.9 billion Muslims. They knew that would fire Christians up. And I'm very specific of not saying anything negative about Muslims. That's your culture. That's your belief system. That's completely different than mine. But I will not tolerate, as a Christian, I'm not going to tolerate being mocked like that. And what's happening, I know, I can't remember the name, but one company has pulled out the funding. And the best thing to do with that is go and find the companies who are funding the Olympics. Don't support them. Don't watch the Olympics. They're dependent they have paid to fund the Olympics in order to get your eyes on it to see their brand. So don't fund them. Voting for politicians. Politicians can't save us. Now, they might help us get to where we want to go, but they can't save us. when you vote for a politician, what effect is that going to have on asset management companies? Very little. Voting with your wallet while you still can, that does have effect. In terms of Trump, again, you have to apply that. You don't have to like everything he does. And he doesn't, like, good people do bad things and bad people do good things. But with Trump, Biden came in and day one signed 96, 94, something, on just under 100 executive orders to reverse Trump's immigration policy. That went on to be another, I think in total 300 executive orders in regards to immigration. How does that benefit? How do illegal immigrants benefit America as a whole? You can't tell me how it benefits. I'm fine with economic migrants. I was an economic migrant. I went to America for the summer to work. I had to have a J1 visa to do it. It was a student visa. So I don't see a problem with it. If you need more nurses, if you need more plumbers, whatever it is, economic migrants can be beneficial to a country. But illegal migrants, where you're having to now, it's costing you. They're not bringing anything to your society. In the South, we're having to pay for them to have houses, and it's just, so then everybody gets angry, and then it's civil unrest. And they want as much chaos as possible because their monetary system is collapsing. Every fiat currency has collapsed. There's been almost 5,000. So they know this, and they have to get in their new system. Now, the quote attributed to Kissinger says, control the people, control the food supply, control the people, control the energy, control whole continents, control the money, control the world. Well, if you're losing the power of your money, the control of the money, which it's not something that happens overnight because the tentacles of the US dollar are throughout the whole world. So it's not something that can just be cut off or it would be absolute chaos. But if you know that you're losing control of the money, then you have to start looking at controlling energy and controlling food. What controls energy and food? Carbon credits and a carbon agenda. So they're moving back into that so if they can control that, then they can force you back into the new monetary system that they bring in.
I mean, I could go on all day. I really do. Just appreciate all the work you do. Why Ireland? I'm actually having a conversation with John Waters tomorrow, but why Ireland? It seems, I don't know that a lot of people over here are really aware of what's going on over there, but do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you're about as close as anybody I know.
Well, the IMF did bail out Ireland previously, and I don't know the terms of that because nobody will know the terms of it, but since then, there's just been a flourishing of the Irish economy, particularly in pharmaceuticals. So I think it's in Cork that they're the main ones for pharmaceuticals, and Ireland had a lower tax rate, so they're getting all these big businesses in. So like Apple came into Ireland, and every iPhone that was sold in the whole of Europe was on paper sold in Ireland in order to, reduce their taxes. So they've had to increase their taxes to be in power now with Europe. So they're now having to accept them. And the consequences of not accepting, because we've seen in Hungary, Viktor Orban said he wasn't accepting them. The consequences is a $20,000 or €20,000 fine per migrant for not accepting them. So it could be for economic reasons. It's mostly males that are, same in America, 60 to 70% males. So I don't know why it was selected in particular, but it's also into the UK. And Ireland, in terms of patriotism, Ireland, we were incredibly patriotic. And that's what one of the number one exports, the current number one export in Ireland is actually blood. But prior to that, it was people. So we went to four corners of the world, and worked. So when they're saying, oh, you forget that, it was like no blacks, no Irish, when you went abroad. But it's like, yeah, no blacks, no Irish, no house, no car, no welfare. You had to go and work. Like when I landed in America to work, There was no apartment sitting waiting for me. No, it was I had to find a job within 2 days because needs must. So there, yeah, it could be economic with Ireland, but Ireland's economy is quite good, so they're being pushed into it.
Maybe just kind of a last thought or question for you. This was the year 2024 with all the elections everywhere. I think that historically the most elections in any one year. What's the perception of what's going on over here and the potential impact of the presidential election in the U.S. on the world as a whole?
It's as divided here, I would say, as it is in America. And the division isn't Trump or Biden. The division is Trump or not Trump. People aren't they're definitely not pro Kamala.
No.
No. This is about as charismatic as wet lettuce. So that's the media-led drive, very much against Trump. But I don't think they know how significant this election is, because if Obama gets re-elected via Kamala, it's just going to be a continuation of the ruination. There's treason right now in America. The enemy is within, and you need to get that enemy out, and you need to, even if it is Trump, like I say, even good people do bad things. You can't expect somebody to be perfect. So people need to have eyes on, and people need to be aware of what's happening. But it seems to be, I wouldn't want his job. He's being handed poison chalice. It's, things are going to have to dramatically change. And he did want to reduce interest rates. But then again, sometimes you don't know, you think you're doing the right thing and you don't really know, you can't know all the consequences of absolutely everything. J.D. Vance is in favour of conscription, the service, so conscription of young males to have skin in the game. That kind of worried me about that choice of vice, because when all else fails, we do know that they take you to war. Maybe Trump is aware that he could be handed a war, that, it could be the cackling Kamala accidentally gets us into a war that, prior. So that's what they just leave him with. Yeah, they leave him with that to clean up before he can actually get anything done. So, but I'm certainly not. I'm very aware of the high potential that we have for going to war now. We're being told it. We're being told that, I know that selective service is now compulsory in America. Sunak was going to try and bring in national service here for boys and girls. Not doing anything beneficial. Jeremy Clarkson says, well, that would be great if you could teach them to farm. Demand that they learn how to do something productive for a year, but no, it's going to the military. It won't be my son. My son, I know what wars are. I do believe that all wars are bankers' wars. What wars are about is about rich men increasing their power or wealth, and poor men fighting those wars for them. And my son won't be involved in that. If there's going to be a war, the only war that my son would be involved in is to go against a corrupt government who are fulfilling a globalist agenda. Other than that, my son won't be involved in a war.
Yeah, right. Well, Sunak, isn't he a disciple of what's his name?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a global leader, a future young global leader, whatever that organization is that they push.
It's absolutely no different with Keir Starmer. He is, you have Obama in his ear and Tony Blair in his ear. So two war president, prime ministers are in his ear. So that's something to be very cautious about with him. And I've read his manifesto, fully costed and fully funded, absolutely impossible. And what he's saying. The only thing that I picked out of his manifesto was there's a lot of talk about knife crime here. And you have to be aware of what's on the media because they want you to hear it. So I anticipated about 6 months ago, last time I was like, okay, what they're going to do is for internet use, you're going to have to show provable ID in order to access the internet, for ban a knife, because they've cracked down on knife sales here, but, people are banning them over the internet. And now that it has just come out that he said, that it's going to be ID for picking them up at the post office. So the next protocol is for ID for accessing the internet. And it's not hard to figure out, because if you go and read Identity in a Digital World, it's the 2018 Insight paper, WEF paper, they tell you it will be for internet use, government services, financial services. The current one in Labour is also to open a bank account. For access to travel, food, healthcare. We also have an Encompass program here that is digital for access to healthcare. So that's all that, if it doesn't work without digital ID. So all people have to do is absolutely reject digital ID. And what I've said is you really need to be careful because you're giving away this very personal data. I'm tackling a store here that's recording your face when you're just going about the store, because that's very sensitive data. Because I've been the victim of card fraud, and I had to reset my password. So it's fairly easy to do. It's a little bit of an inconvenience. You don't have a card for a week, okay, but I can't reset my fingerprint, my eyeball, or my face. So you really need to be careful before you give out this ID, because your whole identity could be hijacked. And how do you prove, if you're proving that you're you with your iris and they have hijacked that, now how do you prove that you're you?
So any final thoughts, Melissa? I mean, I look around and I think there's layers you can dig into things. I have questions of why Vance is even involved. I mean, you can really start trying to analyze decisions and the whys, and, even the whole assassination attempt. I mean, there's more going on. I mean, how does that, to me, on one hand, you can look at it as, wow, that just tells you the state of affairs and how scared they are of a guy like Trump who's not owned getting into office. But then, but the other side of it is how can you ignore, I mean, how does that happen? The guy you know what I mean? If you're just like some person thinking, how does the Secret Service let a situation, right, I know. But this is my point. These are things that I think the average person just sort of took for granted, never thought twice about it. And then to start having it thrown in your face that, gosh, there may be something going on here that's inside. I mean, for anybody that's not really paying attention, and I still feel that there is, I probably shared this with you before. There's a difficulty for some, even now, to be able to go over that hump to think that the government's out to actually harm me. I know that sounds crazy, because to me, it's like, of course they are. They've been, and you start to connect all the dots and you go back in history. But I start thinking maybe the positive of this accelerated need to get this agenda moving forward is really exposing a lot of things that even kind of a person that doesn't want to go there can't ignore. Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Yeah, well, the reason people are waking up is bad people are actively bad, right? So they're consumed with it. But good people tend to just go about their day, and good people don't even go out and trying to do actively good every day. We tend to be good and kind throughout the day. So you can't understand their mindset. So you can't get your head around, well, why would they be out to get us? But in terms of personality type, there's just a personality that's whole focus. There's people that need a sense of belonging. There's people that need love. There's people that need freedom. And there's people that need power. And they just are in that top quadrant of needing power. And they will do. And psychopaths, you've got about 3% of the world that are psychopaths. So that's a killer combination right up there. And they tend to, if you look at the data regarding psychopaths, most of your CEOs of businesses are, because they're incredibly charismatic, intelligent, and they tend to manipulate, get themselves into positions of power. That doesn't mean that they don't have function. They're incredibly good psychopaths. But you have to be aware that they can also be really bad. And to think that your government care about you, there's a particular personality type that wants the power and wants to be in government. And they're actually not the people that we want representing us at all, but they're the people that tend to get into those positions. So to think that everybody is on your side and a friend, they're not. We think that we're incredibly civilized. We think that we, are good people and a good society. Turn out the lights, shut the supermarkets for 6 weeks, and see how kind and civilized people really are. It's all just a veneer top. So that's what these people are. Some of them are genuinely trying to do good, but the most of them really don't care what position you're in. They're still going to be fine. They've themselves sorted, and they really don't care about other people. And that's something that good people don't get. I think that's the opportunity for what they don't understand about us is that we actually do care for other people. And I'm sure you've seen the videos. The people that have the least tend to give the most. There's people on the streets that if you sat down beside them and said, I'm hungry, would give you half of what they had. So maybe we should be more akin to those people than wanting to have all of the stuff. And that's how the consumer lifestyle, we're going to have to change whether we like it or not. It's game over for us with that. So we've got to get good with that and realize what your wealth really is.
A couple of things. One, the CEO psychopath. Russell Napier brought that up. It was actually a book that did a study, and 1 out of 4, would qualify as a psychopath. But, what you just said, I mentioned Charles C. Smith earlier. We had a conversation a few months ago, and that was, we were talking about, the unsustainability, and you talked about the top 1% owning 50% of the wealth of the world. All these things, as you've said, the debt, it is not a sustainable path, and it's all kind of coming to a head. I think people just feel that inside, but you're right. There is a sacrifice that's coming. There has to be, there's got to be a balancing out to, somehow, you want to call it a reset. That's a reset, whatever it is. And that's not just a material adjustment. That's more of a spiritual kind of I think, shift. But you reminded me of something, when you talked about the poor people who tend to give. We used to do, when we were in California, we'd go up to Skid Row once a month with another church. And, because I never wanted to be the guy that was just writing a check, and doing my good. I mean, that's fine. But to really get a flavor of the suffering, we'd go up and at midnight, walk Skid Row with another church and talk to people in tents and bring hygiene kits and blankets and whatever. But what's interesting is when I talk to people, the hardest part of the life on the street wasn't necessarily worrying about your next meal or those kind of things. It was being ignored. It was the human connection, and you wouldn't think that, but that was a common thing, was just connecting with other people. And it sort of speaks to what you're saying, because all this separation, at the end of the day, we are all connected. And I think that is, if there's a place to put some hope, I think it's in that kind of humanity. Because, yeah, like you said, I mean, I remember those videos when the COVID happened. There was a couple in Australia that was buying up every last roll of toilet paper at the expense of, everybody else, in a panic. And but then you wonder, like you said earlier, too, it was, I mean, in my brain, those people were probably paid. They were probably paid to do that, to create a panic. You know what I mean? That's the thing. And so we're really left with our own discernment. I think the experiences we have in life prepare us to be able to kind of, and I think that's where it's come to me for the last few years now, is really I'm not really relying on what people, the authorities, the whatever tell me. How does it feel? Does it resonate with my own experience?
I've spoke to you before about the spiritual bank balance and the financial bank balance, and both are very, very important. But what if you started telling your kids from as young as they were that you have to put into your spiritual bank balance? Did you put into your spiritual bank balance today? Did you do something kind? Did you say something kind? What if we started, because you can't help anybody without, I had this conversation with my daughter. I think she was about 9, and I had done something nice for somebody, and she goes, but that, it's not, because it feels good for you. And I'm like, well, it's winner chicken dinner then, isn't it? It's because you can't help somebody without helping yourself, but you can't hurt somebody without hurting yourself too. I do believe that we're all connected. We're all participating in creation right now. And that's quantum physics is now starting. You've seen the double slit experiment. Quantum physics is now starting to prove that we are all participating in creation. And if we came from that aspect, then maybe we would have a completely different way of being. And like I said, maybe it's time that we made the people sacred again, instead of the bottom line always being sacred, and we'd all have a better life experience. We don't need everything that we have. We've become so greedy. And that's what I think, is it Buffett or Charlie? I think it's Buffett that speaks of pretentious wealth. So it's not about greed. There's only a few people that are greedy. It's about envy. So we've more now than we've ever had. If you think about when you were a child, when your parents were children, they couldn't have dreamed of all of the luxuries and the benefits that we have to live in today. And still so many people aren't happy because it's never, but what do they have? So it's about pretentious wealth. It's just about being better than somebody else. And that's where I think that we need, that was harnessed for the debt-based economy, to just keep on wanting more. And it hasn't made us happy. Look at the antidepressant prescription, they're through the roof. So we can conclude it doesn't make us happy. So let's try something else. And when you went and helped those people, you felt your innate knowledge of yourself was that you did something good, and that's why you felt good. And maybe people should get their dopamine hits, their serotonin from that, rather than likes or cars or handbags. And there's nothing wrong with stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just that it shouldn't be more important than people. And it never really would be, because if a tsunami came through and wiped out your house and your neighbour's house, you wouldn't be running into your house looking for your Louis Vuitton handbag. You'd be running in looking for your kids. You're making sure that your friends, your family, everybody in your neighbourhood was safe. And then the thing that most people will go for is photo albums. So let that tell you what's really important.
Listen, Melissa, I appreciate you. It's just great having a conversation. And I think, again, silver linings of the way the world's accelerating and shifting is that, people like you are out there that do work, that do a lot of research, that have an educated opinion, and just bring another way of looking at things to others. And it's all, you said it when I first talked to you, the very first time we ever spoke last year. It's an information war. And I do feel like you said, that, it may be little pebbles in the water, but those ripples they keep going. They keep going and going and going, and you don't know who you're going to touch or how it's going to affect somebody or who's going to share. And not everybody sees things that way, but I appreciate that you do, and I really appreciate your time on a Sunday. So just thanks again, and I'd like to just commit you, if you can, let's hook up again in 6 months. I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see where we are at the beginning of the year. So yeah. So I think that'll be a perfect way to start 2025. But anyway, just say hi to Paul, and thank you for joining me again on UpThinking Finance.
Thank you for inviting me.
Emerson Fersch is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Advisor services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from Capital Investment Advisors. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and the companies they represent are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Capital Investment Advisors. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal expert. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.